everybody and welcome back to my channel. So today I'm going to be doing another video about university. So in this video I'm going to be talking about the differences between my hometown and Cardiff. So my hometown is Bournemouth. I moved here when I was about 14 months old and I've lived in Bournemouth for my whole childhood. So there are quite a few differences between Bournemouth and Cardiff, but there is also quite a few similarities or things that are different but still quite similar. Obviously the main difference is that Cardiff is in Wales and Bournemouth is in England. And I feel there is quite a big difference between England and Wales. But that is just from my experience. I am from the south of England and I've only ever experienced the south of Wales, which, you know, Cardiff is in the south of Wales. The population of Bournemouth is around 190,000 people. However, the population of the surrounding areas of Bournemouth, which include Christchurch and Poole, because Bournemouth is kind of known as BCP, which is Bournemouth, Christchurch and Poole, that has a population of around 400,000 people. And the population of Cardiff is around 350,000 people, so pretty much the same and very similar to the BCP area. So for me, it isn't a big jump from a small town to a big city. For me, it's kind of the jump from a large town to a small-ish city. It's obviously, Cardiff isn't the size of London, it's not the size of Manchester, Liverpool, cities like that. It is a smaller city, but it is still the capital of Wales. Another difference, but also kind of a similarity, is that Bournemouth is on the coast. So from where I live, I'm a 5-minute walk down to the beach with the cliff tops and the beach. Cardiff doesn't have a beach, however it does have a bay. The bay is kind of further out, so from where I lived in first year in St Geneth Hall, it was about a 20-minute drive. It is further away from the place that I was living, so obviously where I live here is really close to the water and really close to the beach. However, Cardiff Bay was a lot further, and Cardiff Bay is kind of further away from the town centre than the beach is from the town centre here in Bournemouth. From what I've seen of Cardiff so far, the high streets aren't as established as the high streets here in Bournemouth. The high streets here in Bournemouth are a lot more kind of organised, and pretty much every shop is open on the high street. However, I haven't seen a fully organised, established high street as of yet in Cardiff. That is to say, there might be established and organised high streets in Cardiff and I just haven't seen them yet. I didn't explore that much of Cardiff, but from what I have seen so far, I haven't seen them. In Bournemouth, the high streets are pretty well established. Where I live, right near Southbourne High Street, it is a very established high street. There's a lot of cafes, restaurants, shops that are good. And then there's also a couple of other high streets in Bournemouth, Westbourne High Street, Boscombe High Street, Charminster. There are quite a few, or Winton, I think, high streets in Bournemouth. The town centres are kind of similar in Bournemouth and Cardiff. They both have areas where cars don't drive up or can't drive through, which is similar. Cardiff does have a much bigger shopping mall and has a lot more high street brands than here in Bournemouth. They've got things like Urban Outfitters and that's the only one I can think of at the minute. But they've got a lot more in Cardiff, especially because they have Cardiff St David's Centre, because St David's Centre has a lot of shopping things in there. Also, another thing that Cardiff has that Bournemouth doesn't have are arcades. So what I mean by that, not like an arcade where you go and play games or anything, not that type of arcade. An arcade is in a little kind of alleyways inside which have loads of little shops and cafes. I guess that's kind of Cardiff's version of high streets. Because in the arcades, which are in the town centre, but you kind of walk through the arcades to get, the arcades are like inside, and then you walk through the arcades to then get to the other side of like the town centre and stuff, which are then outside. But yeah, the arcades are really nice. So they have lots of cafes, restaurants, shops, like clothes shops and like vintage shops and things like that. So I feel like the arcades in Cardiff kind of the Cardiff's version of the Bournemouth high streets. In Cardiff there is a lot more greenery in the sense that there is a massive park in Cardiff called Bute Park, and that is really, really big. And yeah, there's not really a massive park in Bournemouth. There are a few small parks, so for example like Kings Park, Queen's Park, things like those, but there's not a bigger park in Bournemouth. There is obviously the New Forest, but that is kind of further out, so you do have to drive from Bournemouth to the New Forest, which can take quite a while. But Bute Park is quite accessible from the city centre, so that is very nice. Also, there are other parks in Cardiff. There's not just Bute Park, there are other smaller parks and things like Alexandra Gardens, which are very pretty. So there's probably a few more outdoor spaces in Cardiff than in Bournemouth. I have found that there are a lot more cars on the road in Bournemouth, and the traffic is worse, I guess, in Bournemouth. Whenever I'm walking, because that's the thing about Cardiff. Cardiff is a very accessible city for pedestrians. Like, you can walk many places, and it's very easy to walk from one place to the next. You pretty much just walk down one main road and then a couple other big roads, and it's easy to walk from places. It is easy to walk around Bournemouth, however, there are more cars on the road, so then it's kind of more difficult to cross the roads here in Bournemouth. In Cardiff, I'd find myself just having to look once and twice, no cars coming, I can just cross the road easily. I don't have to press the lights, whereas in Bournemouth, I'd either have to wait for quite a while to cross the road, or I'd have to press the lights because there's just too many cars and I can't cross without going up to the traffic lights. Cardiff and Bournemouth both actually have a bike system. So Cardiff have the Next bikes, which you just get the app for, and then you can ride the Next bikes. And Bournemouth have the Beryl bikes. The one thing about the difference between those is that the Beryl bikes are newer than the Cardiff Next bikes. And the Beryl bikes, you don't have to lock them in like you do with the Next bikes. So with the Next bikes, once you get it, you can then bring it back to the same place, or you have to take it back to a station and like lock it in. But with the Beryl bikes, you could leave them anywhere because they don't need to be locked into an actual station point. You can just leave them anywhere. But again, those things are like really handy and really easy and fun to use. And again, Cardiff is very good for bikes. There's more space on the roads. I feel like the roads in Bournemouth are a little bit smaller sometimes, especially like the residential roads are smaller. That might be the same for Cardiff, but I haven't seen that many residential roads. But again, if you're riding a bike, it's probably easier to ride it in Cardiff because there's not as many cars on the road. So if you're worried about riding a bike when there's loads of cars on the road, then it's probably easier to do that in Cardiff because there's not as many cars on the road. There is definitely a lot more litter in Cardiff. I rarely see litter in Bournemouth, very rarely. But in Cardiff there is quite a lot of litter, and that is a big issue, I think, for Cardiff. The weather is pretty much the same between Cardiff and Bournemouth. I think Cardiff might be 1 or 2 degrees warmer most days, but again, it's kind of the same as Bournemouth, so it can rain for a while, it can be sunny. It's not extreme coldness, extreme hotness. It's pretty much the same with Bournemouth, apart from it's a little bit warmer because it's not as close to the water as we are here in Bournemouth. Another difference is that Cardiff is full of young people. So you walk around and you see, people from age between 18 to 25. You rarely see people over the age of 25 or a child. You rarely see a young child. Obviously you do see people over the age of 25, and you obviously do see people under the age of 18, but the majority of the time you're going to be coming into contact with people kind of the same age as you. Whereas in Bournemouth, that's a lot different. Bournemouth is more family friendly. There are more families, there are more young families with young children, and also there's a lot more elderly people in Bournemouth than in Cardiff. I personally prefer not seeing 18 to 25 year olds all the time because it can be a little bit intimidating, but it is still nice to see that young population. The transportation in Cardiff, as in the public transport, I'm not too sure what it's like bus wise. I don't really know where the bus stops are and how often the buses run, whereas in Bournemouth it's very clear where the bus stops are, and buses run very regularly in Bournemouth. You always see buses. I don't really see buses that much in Cardiff. I do think that the trains are really good in Cardiff because there are quite a few I think there's 2 or 3 train stations in Cardiff, which is also good. Also in Cardiff has more like bigger things. For example, they have like the BBC building in Cardiff, like that is really cool, especially if you're doing like media and communications. That's really cool. And they have like the what's it called? Cardiff is good because it is the capital of Wales. There are a bit more opportunities, for example, for like work experience and internships than there probably would be in Bournemouth, because Bournemouth is still a little bit limited. Obviously you could go to Southampton from Bournemouth quite easily, but I think Cardiff does have more opportunities in that sense. So there are actually probably more similarities than differences between Cardiff and Bournemouth. They're pretty, they're kind of the same size, they're kind of near the water, even though Bournemouth is closer. And yeah, so it's just kind of the differences between living in England and Wales, or like the south of England and the south of Wales. I do feel like it is a little bit different. I don't know, I just feel like when you cross the border into Wales, it does feel different. I don't know if that's just me saying this or if other English people would agree, but yeah, it definitely does feel a little bit different. Moving to Wales has made me feel more English, I guess. But yeah, it's not a major difference. Obviously, it's still part of the UK and everything, but yeah, it's just something that it's difficult to explain how you feel. But Wales does feel different than England. But that's not necessarily a bad thing, so don't take that as a bad thing. But yeah, overall, Cardiff is great, Bournemouth is great. I probably personally do prefer Bournemouth, only because, you know, I'm used to Bournemouth, I grew up here, I love being able to go to the beach really easily. I love the high street that I live by, I love how clean it is, but Cardiff is still a good place to go, and you know, it's a great place for uni students. So yeah, those are differences between Cardiff and Bournemouth. I hope you enjoyed this video, and I'll see you in my next one. Thanks for watching, bye bye.